There are moments in life when you find yourself standing still, not because there is peace, but because something inside is holding you back. You feel it like a silent command, an invisible weight pulling on your every decision. You move, but it's not freely. You act, but it is not fully. You speak, but your words are filtered, softened, calculated. And when you look for the source of this quiet resistance, you often look outward first. You scan the faces around you. You revisit past voices. You search for the one you call senior, believing it to be someone else, older, louder, someone who once had authority over you and perhaps still does. But what if the one you are begging is not a person? What if the senior is a voice you carry inside? What if the one you are asking to stop is you? In every one of us there exists a master, the one who leads with clarity, teaches with kindness, corrects with wisdom, and guides without ego. The master knows when to rest and when to push, when to speak and when to remain silent. The master brings harmony between effort and ease. But right next to the master lives another force, the tyrant. And the tyrant wears many of the same clothes. It speaks with confidence. It commands with certainty. It uses discipline as a weapon instead of a tool. It confuses pressure with growth. And it convinces you that pain is the only path to transformation. The challenge is that both the master and the tyrant live inside the same temple, your mind. And if you are not careful, if you are not deeply aware, you will follow the tyrant believing it is the master. You will call it strength when you deny yourself rest. You will call it dedication when you punish yourself for falling short. You will call it excellence when you chase perfection with no joy, no pause, no compassion. And slowly, without realizing it, you will become a servant to your own shadows. You wake up early, not because your body is ready, but because your inner tyrant has convinced you that rest is weakness. You rehearse every conversation, not because it brings clarity, but because the tyrant in your mind fears judgment more than it values truth. You overtrain, overwork, overthink, because you have come to believe that being still, being satisfied, even being proud is dangerous. Where did you learn this? Who taught you that kindness is laziness, that softness is failure, that ease is an enemy? Often we carry the voices of our past long after the people are gone. A strict parent, a critical teacher, a harsh mentor. These are the original tyrants. They may have believed they were helping you. They may have loved you in their own way. But their voices didn't just fade when you grew older. They became part of your inner dialogue. And over time, their commands became your default thoughts. You stopped questioning them. You accepted them as truth. You told yourself this is just how you are. But that is not who you are. That is who you've been trained to be. That is who you became in order to survive a chapter that has long passed. You became the student of pressure, the apprentice of control. And now, you continue the cycle alone. You stand in front of the mirror, not as your own supporter, but as your own judge. You evaluate your worth, not by your peace, but by your productivity. You measure success, not by fulfillment, but by exhaustion. And when your body whispers, slow down, the tyrant inside says, keep going, or you'll fall behind. You begin to beg, quietly, unconsciously. You beg for peace, but don't allow yourself permission to rest. You beg for love, but don't believe you deserve it unless you achieve more. You beg for clarity, but drown in constant striving. You are begging the tyrant, and the tyrant is you. And yet, there is something deeper still. There is a part of you that is watching all of this. A quiet observer, a silent witness. That is the master, the one who sees the suffering and does not react in panic. The one who knows that discipline is sacred, but without compassion, it becomes self-harm. The one who understands that strength is not force, it is balance. That master is not loud. The master waits patiently. And it speaks when you finally become still enough to listen. The master says it is not weak to rest, it is wise. It is not shameful to fall short, it is human. It is not noble to burn yourself out in silence. It is blindness. And when you begin to hear that voice, even faintly, you begin to awaken. You begin to question, who has been in charge of my life? Who have I allowed to lead me? Love or fear? Trust or doubt? Master or tyrant? Many people confuse punishment with progress. They think that the harder they are on themselves, the faster they will grow. But suffering without reflection only hardens the heart. It does not open it. And true growth is not about hardening. It is about opening. Opening to awareness. Opening to self-respect. Opening to gentleness. You cannot hate yourself into becoming better. You can only love yourself into becoming more whole. When you sit quietly, when you breathe deeply, when you listen inward, not for orders, but for understanding, you will start to notice a shift. The inner commands change tone. The voice becomes less sharp. The thoughts become less urgent. You realize that you are not behind. You are not failing. You are not broken. You are simply tired of being ruled by something that no longer deserves your obedience. This is where the real strength is forged, in choosing the master, in firing the tyrant, in saying to yourself with conviction, this ends here. Not with violence, not with blame, but with clarity, with ownership. You declare, I will no longer speak to myself in ways I would never speak to someone I love. I will no longer chase perfection at the cost of presence. I will no longer punish myself for being human. And you begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself, not as a slave, not as a soldier, but as a student of the present, a student of balance, a student of breath. You wake up and check in, not check off. You move your body not to punish it, but to honor it. You speak to yourself not with scolding, but with sincerity, and the master inside smiles. The transition is not easy. The tyrant does not leave quietly. It will try to regain control. It will whisper warnings. You'll fall behind. You'll get soft. You'll lose your edge. And in those moments you must stand firm, not with aggression, but with assurance. You must remind yourself, what I lose in pressure, I gain in power. What I release in fear, I recover in presence. You are not less because you are gentle. You are not weak because you are kind to yourself. In fact, it is the greatest strength to choose softness when the world has taught you to be hard, to choose awareness when fear demands reaction, to choose the master when the tyrant has ruled for years. This is not a momentary decision. It is a practice, a ritual, a path. You will forget, you will slip, but each time you return, you become stronger. Each time you choose the master, the tyrant weakens, and one day, without even realizing it, you will wake up and the inner battle will be quieter. You will feel lighter. You will look in the mirror and see a teacher, not a tormentor. A guide, not a guard. So when you find yourself saying, I am begging you, Señor, stop this now, know that you are not weak. You are becoming aware. You are not failing. You are waking up. You are remembering that the true master was never someone else. It was always you. Patient, present, waiting for you to reclaim your own mind. And now you are ready. Sometimes, when things begin to fall apart, the instinct is to make them look right again. If something is broken, we polish it. If something is falling, we prop it up. If something is hurting, we cover it quickly with something bright, something pleasing. But no matter how often you repaint a wall, the rot beneath it will still be there, and eventually it will come through. It will make itself known again, stronger, deeper, and more demanding of attention. You do not fix rot by painting the walls. You fix rot by going into the foundation. This is not just about buildings, this is about people, this is about lives, this is about you. We all reach moments when we realize that something feels off. Perhaps you felt it too. You wake up feeling tired, even after rest. You speak, but your words feel distant. You smile, but it doesn't touch the deeper part of your spirit. You try harder, move faster, do more, but something inside is still not aligning. So what do? Most people begin to paint. They change their schedule, they try new routine, they buy better clothes, they reorganize their environment, and for a time it works. For a time the room feels cleaner, the cracks feel hidden, the discomfort seems manageable. But in quiet moments, when the external stimulation fades, the inner weight returns, that familiar tension, that restlessness, that quiet ache that whispers, "This isn't it. This isn't the problem. You're fixing the wrong thing." And this is where honesty becomes the gate to transformation. You must ask yourself, not with judgment but with courage, where am I trying to decorate pain instead of addressing it? Where am I trying to look okay instead of becoming whole? Rot does not start on the surface, it begins within. It is silent, it is slow, and often it begins as something you ignore, a small hurt that you pushed aside, a disappointment you didn't allow yourself to feel, a betrayal you refused to confront, a truth you denied because you weren't ready. These moments do not disappear, they settle, they go underground, they enter your behaviors, your patterns, your reactions, and over time they shape the way you see the world and yourself. You might think it's not that serious, I've moved on, but emotions don't vanish just because you don't talk about them. Pain does not dissolve just because you smile over it. The body remembers, the spirit remembers. And every time you ignore what is real inside, you teach yourself that truth is unsafe. You become a builder of facades instead of a gardener of roots. So when the structure begins to creak, when relationships feel strained, when work becomes empty, when joy feels unreachable, you must ask not what do I need to change on the outside, but what have I buried that now seeks light? There is a story of an old temple, abandoned and falling apart. The villagers passed it every day but never entered. One day, a curious boy stepped inside. The walls were cracked, the air was heavy, but in the center, hidden beneath fallen beams and dust, was a statue of pure gold, tarnished, forgotten, but whole. The villagers had built around it, covered it, ignored it, thinking it had lost its value, but the boy saw what remained, and with care, he cleared the debris and revealed what had always been there. This is what we must do with ourselves. We must stop painting over the cracks. We must stop pretending that structure means strength. We must go into the dust, the silence, the forgotten places, and remember what is still there, untouched, unbroken, waiting. When we are hurt and do not process it, we begin to live from the wound. We carry armor, we become reactive, we avoid intimacy, we chase goals, not out of inspiration, but to fill the void. We wear ambition like a bandage, but bandages do not heal what is never cleaned. And you cannot build peace on a foundation of unacknowledged pain. The reason this is difficult is because we have been taught to value image over integrity. From a young age, we are praised when we perform well, when we appear strong, when we look composed. But few are taught how to sit with sadness, how to grieve openly, how to ask for help without shame. And so we become performers in our own lives, masters of display, but strangers to our own hearts. But performance is exhausting, and eventually the body protests through anxiety, through fatigue, through illness, through emotional numbness. These are not flaws, they are signals. The body speaks when the mind has silenced too much truth. The spirit speaks when the soul is left unheard for too long. You cannot keep putting on a new face every time the old one begins to crack. You must ask, what is underneath? Not as an act of punishment, but of liberation. Perhaps you are still angry about something that happened years ago. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but it does. It lives in your tension, in your defensiveness, in your inability to trust. That's the rot. Not visible at first, but spreading. Perhaps you carry shame, shame from failing, from being rejected, from not living up to someone's expectation. You cover it with achievement, with perfectionism, but no medal will remove what you haven't felt. That's the rot. Perhaps you feel unworthy of love, so you settle for relationships where you must constantly prove your value. You give and give, hoping to be enough, but love that is performed cannot sustain. That's the rot. And so the path is not about pretending the house is fine, it's about entering it, light in hand, and saying, I'm ready to see everything. You do not blame, you do not shame, you do not rush. You witness, you listen. You ask the deeper question, what has been calling for my attention that I keep painting over? This is where true strength arises, not in endurance, but in presence, not in hiding pain, but in meeting it with compassion. Pain is not the enemy, avoidance is. Suffering is not what breaks you, denial is. To repair the foundation of your being is to return to honesty, to let yourself be fully human, flawed, complex, tender, wise. You begin to speak differently, not to impress, but to connect. You begin to rest, not because you earned it, but because you need it. You begin to forgive, not to excuse, but to release yourself from carrying what was never yours to hold forever. As you do this, something begins to shift. The light that once only touched the surface begins to move inward. You start to feel alive, not because life is easy, but because it is real again. Your joy is no longer hollow. Your peace is no longer performative. Your strength is no longer stiff. The rot clears. Not all at once, but layer by layer. And with every layer cleared, you return home to yourself. You no longer fear the cracks. You see them as doors. You no longer chase perfection. You seek presence. You no longer decorate your prison. You walk out of it. And when you build again, you build with truth, not with appearances. You lay each brick with awareness. You allow your emotions to visit, not to rule, but to teach. You become a living temple. Strong, not because it looks untouched, but because it has weathered truth and welcomed it. You see, nothing in nature hides its wounds. The trees do not cover their scars. The rivers do not conceal their changes, and yet they are beautiful, not because they are flawless, but because they are whole. So too must you become whole, not by fixing every crack, but by learning to live through them with light. You don't fix rot by painting the walls. You heal it by returning to the place it began. You meet it with courage. You face it with patience. You stay until it has spoken, until it has been honored, until it has left. And then you begin again.